Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome to members and the public to this meeting of the North Yorkshire Council Skipton and Ripon Area Constituency Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Nathan Hull, I'm the chair of the committee and the vice chair is Councillor Andy Brown, who's sat here just down in front of me here. Can I remind everyone that today's meeting is being audio recorded and the recording will be made publicly available in the next few days on the Council's website. As this is a public meeting, recording is allowed at Council Committee meetings. I've not been notified that anyone has contacted Democratic Services expressing a wish to record the meeting today. Is anybody here wanting to make a recording of the meeting? If so, could you please raise your hands so we can just see who you are? Okay, I can't see anyone, so we'll continue. In terms of housekeeping, can I remind people that mobile phones should be switched off? Or at least kept on silent. Please can members always use their microphone when speaking so your voices can be heard to the public who are here today present at the meeting. I've not been made aware that there's going to be a fire alarm expected this afternoon, so if the alarm does sound, could people please make their way out of the room by the nearest exit and gather in the square opposite the town hall. The officers in attendance today to support the meeting are Stuart Mills, who's a Development Management Team Manager, Jessica Harrison, who's a Principal Planning Officer, Kelly Dawson, a Solicitor, and Vicky Davies from Democratic Services. So moving on to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Vicky, have we received any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor David Ireton and Councillor Nick Brown is his substitute, and also from Andrew Williams. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2, minutes for the meeting held on the 3rd of February 2026. These can be found on pages 3 to 6 of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
Propose approval.
Okay, can I have a seconder? Okay, proposed and seconded, thank you. So the minutes are approved as an accurate record, so we just need to sign those.
Chairman, can I recall that I abstained because I wasn't at the meeting?
And the same for me, Chair. I was not at the meeting either.
And Councillor Brother as well.
Sign every page now.
Yeah, very honest.
Come close to the door.
Okay, keep going now.
Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 3, are there any declarations of interest? And I'd also ask members at this point if anyone has been lobbied either for or against any of the applications.
Can I declare that I am the member of the Wathvale and Bishop Monckton division, which Dishforth is in, and so I declare an interest, obviously, but wish to speak throughout the meeting, as I'm not predetermined.
Thank you. Councillor Brodigan.
Thank you. Yes, just to say that I have been lobbied.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I've been lobbied against the application and read but have no bias. I have been obviously lobbied with letters from Mr. Thackeray and various other people.
I've been lobbied against it, but obviously not predetermined.
I've also been lobbied against it, but I have a unbiased view as we come into the meeting. Okay, thank you. So coming on to agenda item 4, which is the substantive business for today, which is an application for outline planning permission for up to 98 dwellings at Top Cliff Road in Dishforth, together with demolition of some existing buildings. Just so everybody's aware, the committee conducted a site visit this morning because it was felt that the potential impact from the proposals could not be properly visualised from photographs and satellite imaging alone. So we have met and had a walk around the site this morning. So if I could please now ask the case officer to introduce the report for us.
Thank you, Chair. This application is made an outline for the demolition of existing buildings, erection of up to 98 dwellings, site access, a retail facility which falls within the F2 use class, landscaping, open space and infrastructure works. All matters are reserved except for the access points to the site, which are proposed from Topcliffe Road. This means that matters such as scale, appearance, layout and internal access are reserved for future consideration should the outline be granted. This is the application site outlined in red. The site is adjacent to Dishforth on the eastern edge. It's 7.15 hectares in size and comprises Grade 2 agricultural land. It contains a number of agricultural buildings which are proposed to be demolished in this corner. The two shown on this plan have already been removed from the site. There is a public right-of-way running through the site in a central location. It comes from Topcliffe Road here, across the site. It leaves the site on that eastern point and travels south to Lingham Lane. This is an aerial view of the village, which is the most recent Google satellite image. The site's outlined now in black. The primary school is located here, the existing village hall here, the public house is roughly around here, and the bus stops are located on the main road running through the village. The sports area and the existing play area are located further south outside of the village, heading down this road that I'm highlighting now. Within my report, I've referenced two sites which have recently been constructed. The one to the north, which we had a quick look at today, that had planning permission for 56 dwellings, and this one over to the west, which was a larger site for 72 dwellings. Both of these schemes were approved around 2018-2019 and were within the adopted plan. This image shows the service village of Dishforth and its development limits. This is taken from the adopted local plan. So that's the site that we looked at this morning, that's the larger site, and this is the application site outlined in red. As set out in the report, Dishforth is a service village which has been considered to be sustainable and therefore appropriate for new housing, as shown by the previous allocations. The application is made in outline, so we do not have full details of the scheme in front of us. However, we do have a set of parameter plans which have been submitted for consideration. I'll run through each of these plans now. So this is the access and movement parameters plan. It shows the site access from Topcliffe Road, the 2-metre wide footpath heading into the village, the emergency access which is required because the number of dwellings exceeds 50, and it also shows the existing public right-of-way which will be maintained on its existing alignment. This is a closer image of the access, a T-junction with 2-metre wide footpath, and the emergency access. There will be a bollard or similar in place to ensure that there's no misuse of that access. Turning to the next parameter plan, this is the land use. So this will control where the built development can go. So as shown in orange, this is where residential development would be allowed, should outline be granted. There is a broad location for the retail facility should that come forward. And members over 45%, around 45% of the site is going to be left for open space, drainage infrastructure, biodiversity area and flood mitigation. This is the landscape strategy parameters plan, showing the key features of the landscape strategy. So we have a green corridor following centrally across the site, which is where the existing public right-of-way will be maintained. We have the green space around the edges of the site, existing trees and hedgerows to be retained around the site, a biodiversity corridor along the Sopagata here, and a green corridor along that edge of the site. Lastly, this is the building heights parameters plan. So this sets out that the maximum height of the dwellings will be 2.5 storey, but at reserve matters they won't be able to exceed that, but obviously they can be below that. Members, this is an indicative master plan that's been submitted. This is just one way in which the site could be built out in accordance with those parameter plans, but this is not something that's been conditioned at this stage. So this could change, but it just serves to show how the site could look with following those parameter plans, the green spaces along the edges of the site, play area, the public right-of-way with that green corridor and street trees, the residential development closest to the village and set back from those boundaries with the countryside. We visited the site this morning, but just some photos taken in the winter to show a comparison. This is the existing site access and the tree line on Topcliffe Road. So the widened footpath will take place here heading into the village. We stood here this morning, so this is looking towards the wastewater treatment works, which you can't see from this view because of the tree line, those trees remaining leaf all year round. And the tree line on Topcliffe Road, you can see it there. If they've not got their leaves, you can see the dwellings set behind them. This is at the lowest point of the site, which will be left open for green space. So you've got the watercourse on the right of the picture and the wastewater treatment works here. You've got the dwellings in that allocated site set beyond, and those are the trees that we've just been looking at. Similarly, this is a photo taken from roughly where we were this morning, looking back towards the village and where the public right-of-way joins. This is a photo taken from the cemetery looking back towards the site. Members, in front of you have a detailed report which goes through each material consideration and assesses the scheme against the local plan and the national framework. As members will be aware, the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing. The current position is 2.2 years. As such, paragraph 11D of the NPPF is engaged, and therefore there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Within my report, I've highlighted the benefits of the scheme together with the harms arising from the development. To recap, the harms include the loss of Grade 2 agricultural land, approximately 7.15 hectares. There's landscape harm, and there's less than substantial harm to the setting of Crown Farmhouse, which is a Grade 2 listed building. Members must give great and considerable weight to that heritage harm. Turning to the benefits, these include the provision of up to 98 dwellings, of which 40% will be affordable. There will be a play area on site which will be secured within the legal agreement. In terms of B&G, the application legally has to provide a 10% uplift. However, the applicant is committed to exceeding that percentage by providing almost 70% increase in habitat units, almost 51% increase in hedgerow units, and almost 12% increase in watercourse units. There's highways improvements including informal crossings and a dropped curb at the bus stop. There's also benefits to the local economy through the construction period and additional expenditure in the area. Members, it's officers' view that the planning harms would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. As such, the scheme benefits from the presumption in favour of development and should be granted subject to conditions and Section 106. That concludes the presentation, but I've received additional representations since the publication of the report, Chair, if you'd like me to run through those. So one representation was received from North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, who raised no objections. We've had emails through from a member of the public regarding drainage. So the person requests that the flood risk assessment is amended. The flood risk assessment states there's no capacity issues with regards to foul drainage, but we know that not to be the case, as Yorkshire Water have written in to say that there is capacity issues. So just to confirm, Yorkshire Water have objected because there is capacity issues. The comment also asked for an updated position from the Environment Agency following the comments from Yorkshire Water. The Environment Agency's comments are talking about flood risk in relation to the watercourse, not in relation to foul drainage, which is something that Yorkshire Water deal with. The Environment Agency requests that no development is located within flood zone 2 and 3, and the indicative master plan and the parameters plan show that not to be the case. They will be in flood zone 1. Officers are happy there's no need for the EA to update their comments. We are all aware that Yorkshire Water object on the basis of the lack of capacity, and we're also aware that Yorkshire Water have a legal responsibility to maintain, cleanse and upgrade their sewers and infrastructure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Brown in a moment, but it's a little bit unusual that for once we have an application where Yorkshire Water have actually said that they've raised an objection on the basis of lack of capacity for sewerage. But I'm sure we've all got questions about that, so I'm going to go to Councillor Brown first of all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a number of questions, as you would perhaps imagine, bearing in mind that this is part of my patch, so to speak. To cut to the chase, firstly, can I ask the officers, is the foul sewage disposal in place to cater for this size of 98 houses? I personally suggest no for a number of years, but can you answer that, please?
Yorkshire Water have written in objecting to the scheme. They've said there's no capacity to take on these 98 dwellings. That is very important, Chair, I think, because it's very, in my experience of coming and sitting on planning committees, it's very rare that Yorkshire Water make any adverse comments about any application, in my view. I've got several sites within my patch, Kirby Hill, there's a number of sites there where Yorkshire Water have also declared their opposition to it because of lack of capacity to deal with foul sewage. My other observation is that across my division, foul sewage has been, in periods of heavy rain, going onto the streets, which I think is an outrageous thing to happen. And maybe this is one of the reasons that Yorkshire Water have opposed this application. So, secondly, are there bus services in place to allow residents to get to work and back again in places such as Ripon for people living on this site? Certainly, I mean Ripon because I think the 70 bus now only goes mid-morning to Ripon, I think. Yeah, there is a bus service. The exact times are within the report. In the highway section, it lists the timings.
I think it's paragraph 10.119 of the report. It's got the details of where the bus stops are and the details of the bus services, and it also highlights as well that the Highways Authority requested a contribution of £2,000 per dwelling to fund improvements to the bus service in Dishforth. And it's a condition as well to secure improvements to the bus stop to include raised curbs and allow accessible access as well.
I understand that, but having looked at the papers very carefully, I don't think anybody on this committee or the planners can guarantee, because the buses are not in the power of the North Yorkshire Council, it's the combined mayor. So we can't really guarantee that forever, despite the 106 monies that are in that you're asking for the developer, that there will be a proper bus service moving forward. You can't guarantee that because it's out of our hands. So that's the other comment I would make in the questions I'm asking you. You can't guarantee that service will continue into the future. Is that right?
I wouldn't be able to guarantee that, no, at all. What I can say is there's a bus service, and that service has been around since District was allocated within the local plan as a service village. So when it was allocated as a service village, that was the bus service that was there at the time and taken into consideration. The application will secure £2,000 per dwelling to improve that service, which is quite a common element of legal agreements when we're looking at these size developments. So hopefully it will be improved, but no, we cannot guarantee what happens in the future. With more people living in the area and using the bus, one would hope that would help.
we're living on a hope and a promise, really, in many respects, which I can't guarantee that the good residents of Dishforth will have this service for evermore, because it's not there particularly at the moment. So that would be that question. Thirdly, can officers guarantee residents that the infrastructure required in sites, this particular site, and indeed sites across my division, are dealt with before houses are built? Because this is the most obnoxious bit, in my view, that the developers aren't forced to build these houses before the infrastructure to deal with them are in place. So I'm very concerned about that. The other questions, Simon Thackeray has written to say that the figures that are being used are not including certain elements from the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water in terms of capacity, and I think that we need to see that before we make any decision, is my opinion on this. Is that what your understanding would be in his letters that he sent to, I think, now? But the capacity is not there to handle the power sewage from this particular site.
Yorkshire Water have written to the council to say that there's no capacity for further dwellings. We've placed a condition on the outline, should it be granted, which relates to foul drainage, and it requires a scheme to be submitted and a timetable. So the developer will have to work with Yorkshire Water to ensure that the infrastructure is upgraded, but it is for Yorkshire Water to upgrade their infrastructure and to look after it.
Can I ask a more specific one before we go forward? That condition 18, does it apply to off-site as well as on-site? Because my reading of condition 18 was it required the developer to make sure the sewage was moved off the site. Does condition 18 require the developer to ensure that Yorkshire Water has provided sufficient off-site processing facilities to deal with that sewage?
The Water Industry Act comes into play there for Yorkshire Water. That there are specific powers in place to ensure that they upgrade infrastructure. So developers and house owners have a legal right to connect to the foul sewer. It's for them to work with Yorkshire Water to ensure that the upgrades are made in time before occupation, and that condition ensures that they can only be occupied in accordance with those details and the timetable. So we do have some control over the matter, but there is still an element which requires the Water Industry Act to govern Yorkshire Water.
So can I just jump in on the same...
Following on from that...
Can I just interject along the same lines? Is that okay?
Sorry?
Can I just give way on the same lines? I just want to ask another question about, and then I'll come back to you. So is what we're saying is there are no real grounds for turning down the application on the basis of Yorkshire Water's objections to lack of capacity, because ultimately somebody has to get Ofwat to compel Yorkshire Water to improve the system. Is that what we're saying? And if so, who is it that compels Yorkshire, that approaches Ofwat and compels Ofwat to take that action against Yorkshire Water?
Yeah, so the MPPF is clear at paragraph 201. It says the planning policies and decisions should be on whether the proposed development is an acceptable use of land, rather than the control of processes or emissions. Planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively. My report goes on to state Yorkshire Water have confirmed there's no capacity, but they have a legal obligation under the Water Industry Act to properly maintain, cleanse and upgrade their sewers. Developers and householders can legally connect Ofwat has statutory powers under the Water Industry Act and Special Measures Act to ensure water companies fulfil their duty to maintain and upgrade their systems.
Can I just follow up, could you do that?
Sorry, Andy, I just want to clarify one thing. Is that what I'm hearing is that you're telling us that we can't turn down the application on the basis of Yorkshire Water's objections, because Yorkshire Water ultimately will be obliged to put the infrastructure in. So therefore, are you saying that that's not not adequate grounds to turn the application down. That's where I'm getting confused.
Chair, if I may, hopefully people can hear me. Hopefully people can hear me at the back of the room. If it just helps in answering the question, the statutory undertaker has the obligation to deliver the sewerage. So that burden will fall to Yorkshire Water. What the powers of the planning authority are is that, and this is set in case law as well and confirmed, that where we have the objection from Yorkshire Water, where there is insufficient capacity, that can be controlled by way of condition. The gramping condition is your attention is being drawn to ensure that development doesn't commence until such time as the capacity issues are resolved. So that's you protecting the amenity of the future occupiers of the site. As I say, that is confirmed in case law that is the local planning authority's control and the proper way to deal with a objection on lack of capacity from any water authority. Thank you, Chair.
The comments from Yorkshire Water on wastewater talk about the objection on the grounds of convention, but then they do also go on in the same paragraph to say, however, should the local planning authority wish to grant permission, Yorkshire Water requests that the following condition is attached to the approval in order to protect the local aquatic environment and Yorkshire Water infrastructure. We actually mention two conditions, one of which regards a drainage strategy. So they do then go on as well to talk about trying to cover some of this by condition, and obviously the approach to National Planning Practice Guidance is that if a condition can deal with the matter rather than go to refusal, then that's what you should do.
Councillor Brown.
Can I be absolutely clear? So if condition 18 is included, it is not possible to occupy the first dwelling until Yorkshire Water has told us that the capacity is there. So it's the same as a Grampian condition that would prevent occupation until Yorkshire Water is satisfied it has put the facilities in place. Is that the situation I'm looking at?
Yeah, so the condition's in two parts. It asks for details before they commence development, so before they put a spade in the ground. It asks for the detailed foul drainage scheme, maintenance arrangements and a timetable for the provision. So then we will consult Yorkshire Water on those details. Hopefully by that stage Yorkshire Water have started to look at upgrading the infrastructure. The second part of the condition states, yeah, like you say, can only be occupied once all those details have been done and the timetable. So this is a condition that is used across the council area and also in appeal, so it is something we're familiar with using, but it is for Yorkshire Water to upgrade their infrastructure.
So if it took them, so just to be absolutely precise, if it took them 5 years to provide that improvement to the facility, nothing could be occupied until they'd actually done it?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I think that there's a comment made earlier that traditionally we haven't seen Yorkshire Water make comments of this nature, and that would be true. But we have started to see this more recently, and you'll note that the comments they've made where they talked about objection, they're talking about because it's not a site that's allocated within the local plan. Obviously, we've had a big change over the last couple of years with changes to the local plan being out of date in respect of housing policies and changes to the housing figure calculation, and this is now something we're starting to see more and more across North Yorkshire from Yorkshire Water on sites that are coming forward, and obviously they're coming forward in greater numbers now, which are not allocated in local plans because of the land supply position that we're in. So this is something that we are going to see more and more. It's not always necessarily appears to be based upon necessarily a specific about a site, and it does rather seem to overlook Yorkshire Water's responsibilities that are under the Water Industry Act.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that point, can you tell me, please, in the planner's guarantee that this is going to be in Yorkshire Water's current capital investment plans? Is it in that plan?
It won't be in any plan now because this is a site that's not allocated. So
it's a 5-year plan, I think. That's recently started.
It it won't be in anything at the moment because
So
it doesn't even have planning permission.
we could find that houses that are built, if they were to get full carte blanche on starting to build, could be 5 years before Yorkshire Water do the capital investment to stop sewage on the streets when heavy rainfall exists, etc., etc. Is that right?
I'm not sure on the timetable for when they'll upgrade.
Well, don't you think we ought to see their timetable? Because I think that we haven't seen their timetable. It doesn't include this, I don't think, as far as I'm aware.
No, Yorkshire Water won't look at sites that are not allocated and don't have permission. It will need to have a planning permission for them to look at it.
Well, that's a bit of cart before the horse, I think. Just changing slightly the subject, because I'm sure this will come up a bit later in debate.
Can Kelly just come in on this point and then we'll come back to you? Is that okay? Thank you.
Yes, members, it was just to clarify, really, sort of straying outside of the local planning authority's remit in this. Obviously, it's a matter for the statutory undertaker of the water body to sort out their infrastructure plan, their future development plan, based on the development plan of the local authority and applications coming forward. That is their statutory duty. That is something that goes beyond the scope of the local planning authority's powers.
Am I right in thinking that Yorkshire Water is not a statutory body at the moment? I've raised this question in this room before and have been told certain things which weren't, I don't think, true.
They are the statutory undertaker. I think the debate last time was around statutory consultees applications, if I recall.
Right, so they are a statutory body.
They are the undertaker.
Right. But if they can't undertake it, it seems a bit daft, doesn't it, really?
But again, I think that's straying outside of the planning authority's remit.
Just moving on to another question, please, Chairman. It says in 2.3 the Council Housing Land Supply is 2.2 years. Have you got any details of that housing, how it's calculated, what it covers? Because I have seen several planning committee decisions which have been made on the basis of 2.2 housing land supply, and I'm not quite sure how you get to that. Can you provide that, please?
It's a bit complicated. It derives from the government standard method, which local planning authorities have been obliged to use since the National Planning Policy Framework was revised sort of 2024, I think. Even before that, before then, there seemed to be some different methods that would be used, but now the way that growth is apportioned is a bit different to how it was. I haven't got all the technical detail there, but this is something that's every authority across the country has got to use this method now.
Well, North Yorkshire planners, with the greatest respect, are using this 2.2 years as a motive to say that we've got to build all these houses without the members of the committee really seeing how these calculations are worked out. I would like to, before any decision is made on this application, see how that is made out. I think other members may consider that interesting as well, because it's constantly used, 2.2 years, and we haven't any of the slightest knowledge of how that's calculated.
I've seen it, Nick.
You've seen it, and are you happy that is...
I'm not happy with the government's decision, but I'm happy they've calculated it correctly.
Right, but in any event, you're the Vice Chairman, you get to see these things.
No,
members don't get to see
it's
these.
sent, I think, to all members of Planning Committee.
Right. Well, I haven't seen it, I have to say, but maybe you can send me that just for my own interest, because we've got a number of other applications in my division which will come up, I'm sure, and how that's calculated, I'd be very interested to see. I reiterate what you said, Vice Chair, that it's the government decision, this. If at the end of the day we can't stop these likes of opportunistic applications, then it is the government, the national government of this country, who is putting these forward without proper thought to how they will be treated by the people, the communities they serve, and I think it is all wrong on that. Can I just ask also, consultation that's been taking place? I don't think there was, I certainly as a ward divisional councillor didn't get any, as far as I'm aware, any bump from Caddick Holmes regarding my opinion of this as part of a consultation process. I know there was a consultation within Dishforth which came out overwhelmingly in favour of this not going ahead because of some of the reasons that have been stated in this report. But as far as consultation, is it not a requirement that the developer has to do proper consultation with the residents before anything happens? That's the question.
There's nothing policy-wise where we can say that we're not happy with the developer's consultation. There's encouragement given to doing it, but there's nothing where we can say in planning policy, that we can refuse something because the developers failed to do an adequate consultation.
So you're basically saying consultation, it means nothing, effectively? No, as far as the residents are concerned?
Not that it means nothing, but I don't think it's really within the scope of the decision that we're making today to say that the developer's consultation exercise influence that. Okay,
I hear what you're saying. On 10.6, little 2, in the report, what do officers think basic services actually are, please? Because I don't think there's too many basic services in Dishforth. But I'd like to know what your definition of basic services is.
Which paragraph, sorry?
10.6, little 2, whatever it is.
Don't see anything about basic services.
10.62 or 10.6 part 2?
Have I misread the...
I think they're on in a different spot somewhere.
Anyway, that was in the report. It talked about basic services.
I think what's being asked is, is this village sustainable by your definition? I think that's what Nick's asking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the council's adopted local plan has allocated Dishforth as a service village and found it to be sustainable. So, yes, it's the council's view that it is sustainable for the purposes of the adopted local plan.
Well, the plan was adopted in 2020, I seem to remember. And there's 6 years have gone by since then. I think one of the pubs no longer exists. So, there's a number of changes that can happen in 6 years. And I would maintain that there are not enough basic services, despite the fact in this application you're talking about a retail shop. It's all very well saying a retail shop will be provided, but someone's got to man it and someone's got to operate it, and there's no suggestion that anyone will come forward to run this at a profit.
It's 10.8.
10.8, is it? I'll find it eventually.
Lower down as well, 10.6.
I thought it was
lower down.
10.8. 10.8. Anyway, the question is there. I don't need to ask any more. What do you consider basic services are as planners?
Well, it includes a variety of things, so sometimes you get some of them and not all of them, things like obviously schools, pubs, shops, village halls, those sorts of things.
It's got a school, it's got a pub, very little else.
Yeah.
Would you say that's enough as a basic service for any village? Well, a sustainable entity?
it was one that anyway, when we were working, before the presumption of favour centre development came, and when we were working to what it was in the local plan, it was in there as a service village where it's saying, we will be allocating land for housing within that level of that tier of villages, which obviously we did with the housing allocation that's now being built out. There's already a commitment with the other site that's being constructed as well. As the report covers as well, the scale of the development that we're seeing here is, I think akin to what we would expect to see coming forward with some of these service villages now, with the next tier up, with the name of them now, top of my head, but with the next tier up with the local service centres, that's sort of Borbridge, Masson, Paisley above this. Paisley's a bit different with it being a national landscape, but around Borbridge you're seeing some developments coming forward with hundreds of houses in it, smaller villages, the other tier the other way, you're seeing smaller applications come forward there in smaller numbers, so I don't think there's anything necessarily that's surprising with the number of houses that's come forward here for service village.
Well, you might think this is this village has basic services. I would probably disagree with you on that front. Under 10.85, the last line states the remains are of local significance when we're talking about archaeological worth. And then in 10.86 it says the county archaeology officer raises no objections. One says there's a local significant aspect to the archaeological remains, and our own council's archaeology officer raises no objection, which doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, I think they've recommended a condition for archaeological mitigation recording, which acknowledges the interest of the remains, but they seem to be satisfied that would be sufficient in respect of that.
Yeah. And 10.103, you say there is a significant housing shortage in the area. Can you tell me how you calculate that? Please, and what the area covers that applies to.
Well, that's talking about the local plan area where we've got a housing land supply position of 2.2 years.
Is that the Harrogate area?
Yeah, within the former.
So that's Harrogate, not. So where are all these jobs going to come? That's going to allow for a significant housing shortage. Where's the employment land for all these houses to take place to feed those employment sites?
Well, there's various allocations, for employment sites all around the former Harrogate district in the local plan, and inevitably you see it, proportioned with bigger sites towards the bigger settlements and sort of scaling down from there.
Just these feeder villages, which feeds perhaps the Harrogate area, as you say, the jobs have got to be there. And if there's very little in the way of public transport, that's not going to help matters as we move to a different climate when it comes to cars. I could go on, Chairman. Maybe I'll let some of my colleagues ask any other questions. But I hear what you say, officers.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
These things.
Come to you.
At this moment in time, I can't agree with them.
Just in terms of I'll call it historical development plan, and this being a service village, do we have any idea how much the population would increase of the village by the construction of 98 houses? Because, I live in a service village where I live in Burstwith, but if the population of Burstwith was to increase by 400 or 500 people, even though it's a service village, I don't think that the default position is that the local services would be adequate for an increase of that many people. So how many people do we think would the population increase by?
don't have a figure in front of me for what the current population of Dishforth is, I'm afraid. Obviously we're obviously aware of the scale, the village, on the plans that's in front of us and the scale of the development that's proposed now.
Okay. Just touching on one other point. The land is currently agricultural land. What grade of agricultural land is it, and is it currently being farmed?
It's grade 2 agricultural land. I believe it is being farmed.
Okay. So where I'm at, the things I'm thinking about at the moment is that there are some arguments for saying there's a benefit to possibly the wider community beyond Dishforth, from what I can see of building this many homes in the former Harrogate district area. But where I'm just struggling to get my head around is what weighting I should give to two particular issues. One is we're being told that the objections raised by Yorkshire Water are not really things that we can take into consideration because they have a statutory obligation to improve the infrastructure, and we would condition that anyway. So if they didn't do that, no housing would be built. So I'm not sure, unfortunately, that I can use that as a...
It's still a question.
It's a question. what I'm trying to get my head around is what weighting should I give to that when making a decision. So that is one question, and then the other question that keeps coming up in my head is: are we saying that our inability to provide an adequate housing supply, given that the government's asked us or told us that we have to build 60% more houses, is that need to comply with a Westminster diktat something that outweighs the other considerations? So this is what I'm just voicing what's going on in my head for the benefit of the room at the moment. I'm going to come back to Councillor Brown again.
Well, I think that last question you asked is also pretty much what I was going into. Clearly, cumulative impact is a big issue for this village. And they've had a series of buildings constructed, quite a large addition to the village. Are we allowed in planning law to consider the impact of cumulative impact on if we add this extra development? Is that permissible under planning law?
I think, members, what you need to be doing is assessing this application on its merits before you, and you have to assess this application and consider it against paragraph 11D, which is very clear that for decision takers, I'll read it out verbatim for you. You should approve developments that accord with the local development plan, or where there is no relevant development plan policies or the policies are out of date, which is obviously where the council finds itself with only having a 2.2 year supply of housing. You should grant permission unless the application of policies that protect areas or assets of particular importance provide a strong reason for refusing the development proposed, or any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in this framework taken as a whole, having particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land and securing well-defined places, providing affordable homes individually or in combination. So that is the test that members should be applying in their mind when they put the factors on the scale to form their planning view at the end.
Okay, I think I hear that answer.
Sorry, can I just ask, what's the definition of a sustainable location?
It is not defined within the NPPF, but obviously the officers have already drawn your attention to the development plan that already assesses out that hierarchy of where development should be going in terms of pushing developments into the more sustainable locations, and that's where you've got your designated service villages, your market towns, or that hierarchy. Probably articulated better by the planners in that sense.
Can I keep going for a bit? We mentioned the local plan a lot. My understanding is it costs 2-3 million of the money of everybody in this room, and it was written, as I understand it, for a 25-year period. or a 20-year period?
2014 to 2035.
That's right, yes.
Okay, so we're not getting 2035, are we? So the local plan still applies and still has some way. What were the reasons why this particular location wasn't included in the local plan? Is there any guidance we've got as to why the plan had 3 developments in this village which were considered adequate and to maintain things like the pub, the school, etc., but an extra one was not considered appropriate? Is there any guidance on that?
So the local plan was effectively planning for, it works out at 637 dwellings per year. And in order to achieve that, there were obviously allocations in the local plan for various sites, including one of the ones we mentioned at Dishforth, and other policies as well to allow development within set development limits of settlements. Like every local plan has development limits, but it is a feature of the Harrogate local plan. So allocations were done to try and provide that for that level of growth that was anticipated in the local plan. When the local plan inspector wrote their letter after the examination, they'd actually said at that point that the local plan was actually planning for more housing than was necessary, and actually took some sites out of the local plan, principally in the national landscape because of the strength of the policy there and landscape protection, but there were also some other developments elsewhere that they took out of the plan as well. Obviously, what's changed now is that we've now got. So that's kind of where that kind of explains where we got to. It's planning for that particular level of growth. But obviously, the issue now is that following what's happened over the last couple of years, we've now got to use the standard method for calculating what the housing need is, and that's gone up from 637 to 1046 overnight. And for that reason, because obviously with the supply of permissions, etc., we've got this land supply position of 2.2 years. That means that we can't give the weight to the development limits, etc., that we were looking to do, and that's why we've got to look at these sites now that were not allocated and that were sitting beyond development limits. Otherwise, we won't be delivering the numbers that we're being asked to do.
Can I come back and then pass to you? So basically what we're being told is we spent a lot of money and time and effort on developing a well-planned local plan, and 2 governments have upped the targets to such a point that if we turn anything down in accordance with that plan, we'll simply get it overturned at Bristol.
Doesn't mean that everything is going to be acceptable. There is that balance which obviously Kelly's mentioned about, although there's a presumption of favour of sustainable development, if something demonstrably and significantly outweighs the benefits of the development, then that can be a reason for refusal, and applications will still be refused and dismissed and appealed where they fail that. But it certainly is more challenging, as you've outlined.
Can I answer Nick and then come back to you?
Can I come back on that?
Yeah.
Well, actually, out of the people in this room, I think I'm the only one that actually spoke at the inspectorate when he came to adjudicate on Harrogate. Apart from Rebecca Burnett, I was the only member who actually spoke against some of the adverse numbers of houses that were going up in my patch, which includes most of the area that I now represent. And the inspector, when he came out with his final judgment, reduced, as you quite rightly say, the total housing numbers by over 1,000. Now, that's what we're working to. And I don't know how many houses have been built against the total. I forgot what the total was for the whole of the planned period, 12,000 or something. How many houses have actually been built in that period since then, from 2014 effectively? Have you got a number?
I don't have that figure in front of me right now, but if you look at the local plan maps, there's actually been quite a good level of delivery within the first years of the plan period in a lot of settlements. There are obviously still some sites to come forward, and some of the big strategic sites, the really big things like Barracks, Malt Kiln, etc. They take a bit further to come forward. But there's been quite a lot of development already from a lot of the other sites that were allocated in the local plan fairly early on in the life of the plan.
You really got to see those.
I think there were some things where obviously people were getting in there first before the plan was adopted, whether in the presumption of...
Would you mind coming back to me at some stage with the total number of houses that have been built against the original target for up until 2035? I know every 5 years it can be reviewed and all the rest of it, but the inspector's the inspector, and as you rightly say, that £2 million is a considerable sum of money and if the goalposts have been moved, it's not particularly conducive except to meet national targets, which we're having to do at the moment. I personally, there's just one other question I'd like to ask at this stage, is, and I know it might not be relevant, but if Yorkshire Water can't put the investment in, as they say, that's needed, obviously, because we're over capacity at the moment for this particular site, and they don't build for over 5 years, does that not put a blight, if we were to prove this, on existing householders within the village? Because if people who are selling their houses suddenly find there's going to be this development taking place, but not for some time, I would have thought that affects their properties and their values, etc., etc., if they wanted to sell them.
That's not a material planning consideration.
Which may not be, but it's reality.
Could I finish? I've got 3 other questions, if I may. First is just, should this be approved and go to details, what early conversations have been had about energy generation and ensuring that solar panel, and particularly what I'm interested in is ground source heat pumps. Have we explored with the applicant the full range of possibilities of reducing energy consumption and bills? Yeah, and I realise it's an early stage, but have we had some exploration?
Yeah, so you're right, it's at an early stage at the moment, obviously being without line, but the applicant has submitted a draft, if you like, sustainability statement, which is online. So it says they'll meet the future homes and building standards, which of course they'll need to do. Every house will have to have an EV anyway, that's written into the legislation now, and then solar and heat pumps are also options, but it really depends on the layout of the dwellings and the fabric first approach. So we've got a condition asking for all that information at a later date. The reason why we like it later in time is so that it's up to date with the most recent standards to ensure we're getting the best out of it that we can.
Okay. Should it reach that stage, could I ask you to ensure that it's not an option for those things, but a firm thing coming forward, because those of us who sit on applications for solar farms in good agricultural land keep making the point that they should be on factories and on housing roofs by preference, and then when it comes to this planning committee we're not actually insisting on it. So it would be really helpful if that conversation would happen. I know there are limits on what we can ask the developer to do legally, so I'm asking you as an officer to try and achieve the maximum that's achievable in terms of making it happen. Don't think I need a reply to that. I do need a reply to this. It speaks in the notes about great crested newts being present on site. I can't see anything other than a plan to, well, I can't see anything that preserves them. I can see plans to get advice on how best to deal with it. I can't see anything that transfers them, finds a location at the bottom end of the site that's suitable for them. What are the actual measures to ensure that the great crested newts survive the development?
Yeah, so we have a condition asking for further information before they start works on how species will be protected, so not just great crested newts but other species. So that's in the condition that we'll get through, and we'll consult our ecologist on that to ensure that that's properly looked at. With the Great Crested Newts, the developers entering into the Natural England scheme, which is a strategic mitigation project, which is quite common to submit into. So they pay money and Natural England go away and improve habitat for Great Crested Newts. But for actually on site, that's dealt with through a condition.
Yeah, I understand it's information and so on, the plans are, but I can't see that there is a preservation of those newts, and I think that's something I need to take into consideration. But I'll go on to my next question, which is, we've had issues about the conservation area and valuable buildings in the conservation area, and we've also had issues about on-site archaeology. Is it possible in any way to reconfigure the site to avoid the areas of archaeological sensitivity and to reduce that risk of conservation area damage that's identified with the historical building? Is there any way that sites can be reconfigured to do that?
With regards to heritage, District doesn't have a conservation area.
Okay, sorry. Then the listed building.
Listed building. Yeah, so there's listed building, Crown Farmhouse, and part of the application site, quite a small part where there's a large agricultural building in situ at the moment. It was owned and belonged to the same person at the same time in the 19th century, so by virtue of that ownership and connection, it forms part of its setting. So changing it by building houses results in lesser substantial harm. That is identified at the very low end of the scale, which is outweighed by public benefit. So we don't feel that any changes need to be made to that. Obviously, the indicative master plan in front of us doesn't necessarily mean houses will go in that bottom corner, but even if there are, we've considered that to be outweighed by public benefits. With regards to archaeology, the officer relevant in that department is happy for this to go ahead as it is, with a condition for mitigation and recording, so that the remains are not so significant to stop the development going ahead.
I mean, what I'd ask you to look at if it does go forward is there's quite a bit of the site in which there's nothing. And we need to know where the archaeology is and where the building is and whether it's possible to avoid the archaeology, and we do know where the listed building is, and it seems strange to build close to the listed building and on the back of houses that may be concerned about amenity issues, and when there's quite a lot of space there that's not being. I'll leave that with you.
Can I just ask a few questions, and please forgive me because I'm not familiar with Dishworth, I don't live there. I just want to ask a few questions about Dishworth itself and about the question about it being a sustainable village, because I'm not altogether sure what that definition of a sustainable village actually is. So if I just run through a few things, and if they're in the report already, please forgive me, but where is the nearest doctor's surgery? Is that at Topcliffe?
Yeah, that's in the report.
How far away is that, please?
I can answer that. I think it's Topcliffe, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know how far away it is?
Yes, 10.119.
So I can't take answers from the floor, I'm afraid.
It's 3 miles away.
Okay, well, I think we all heard that then. Okay. Is there a bus service to Topcliffe?
It's in that paragraph we saw before, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I can't take it.
There is a bus service. It takes about 20 minutes and it runs 4 times a day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, apologies. It is within the report, as someone just mentioned. The bus service does provide access to Topcliffe, which contains doctor's surgery and other amenities.
Okay. So we know there's a primary school, and my assumption would be that high school children would have to go to Thirsk or to Ripon. How many pubs do we have in the village? Is it just the one pub? Okay.
Yeah. I think it's one pub, the active one.
We currently don't have a shop,
No.
but the planning permission accommodates a potential shop which somebody would have to want to take over and run at profit.
As I said earlier, you know, that shop is a little sweetener, I think, towards the planning being approved. But it doesn't mean to say it's not an obligation on the developer to build it or to man it. So it's meaningless in many respects, because apart from basic items like milk or bread or whatever, you know, most of the people would go to the nearest supermarket where the prices are very much more amenable.
Okay, we don't then have a post office.
The question is, I wouldn't say that is part of the basic services. Do the planners agree?
So we have
Having
no
a shop.
We have no shop. We have no post office.
Yeah.
We have a bus service of sorts. We can't crystal ball and say whether it will be there or not in the future. There is some contributions in the Section 106 towards improving bus facilities, but I don't know what that means. Does that mean that putting in things like a bus shelter and a bus stop, or is that to provide a more regular bus service or supplement the bus service that's already there? What would the Section 106 contributions go towards?
Yes, so that financial contribution is for the bus itself. So, frequency, more services, different timings. It's not for the bus stop infrastructure that's there as existing, and highways have considered that what's there to be acceptable in terms of infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any sports clubs or local junior cricket team or a football club for boys and girls to join?
To the south of Dishford there is sports facilities and a play area there.
There are sports facilities, Chair, but and more hopefully could be developed. But I don't know. That's raised another question of local communities. 106 commuted sums have not been calculated yet, I don't think, for the local community sports halls or whatever. Can you perhaps confirm that's the case?
We do the calculation at reserve matter stage because it's dependent on the number of dwellings that come forward. With this being an outline, it's up to 98, but of course less than that could come forward, and then they'll pay proportionally per dwelling. So that money will be secured, it's just dependent on the numbers.
Because the last development at Strata Homes, there was quite a considerable amount of money going to the village hall, existing village hall, which didn't need over 200,000 spending on it. But I think some of that money is going to a new sports hall or village hall near the sports hall. And is there no money being allocated under commuted sums in the Section 106 agreement you've got in the document?
So District Power Council wrote to us and requested if contributions were secured for the village hall, that would be for either the existing or a new one, and we're happy to do that for either or. So we will secure money for that, but again it's dependent on the number of dwellings that come forward.
Well, you've got 90 odd houses. What's the commuted sums going to be in the 106 agreement that you've negotiated with the developer?
The outline is up for 98, but of course a development of that size might not come forward. It might be less than that, so it's per dwelling at the time of the reserve matters how much comes forward. But that amount is consistent across any development across this former Harrogate area. They'll pay the same amount. It's just depending on how many dwellings they ask for at reserve matters.
So you're basically saying that you haven't finalised the commuted sums under the 106 agreement? You haven't mentioned Sill here, but...
We can't finalise how much they pay until we know how many dwellings they want at reserve matters stage.
You've got on the master plan the number of houses they look to build.
If it's exists in terms of the section 106, obviously that would need to be negotiated once we have the resolution. But in matters like this where we have an up to, we have an unknown quantity to calculate that precise figure to go into the legal agreement, what we would do is we would define it in a formulaic manner. So it would be calculated in accordance with the SPD calculation, so it's clear and transparent how the sum is going to be calculated, and then it will be calculated on at reserve matters for the final number of dwellings that comes forward. So it's a bit like the highways, what you'll see in the table is going to be £2,000 per dwelling. So if 60 comes forward, the sum that gets paid will be 2,000 times 60. In terms of the open space, it will be calculated based on the number of dwellings that comes in the reserved matters in accordance with the formula. And that will be secured in the 106, but just not at a prescribed figure, because obviously that figure may fluctuate.
So what you're basically saying is that Section 106 agreement has not been finalised yet.
Section 106 agreements are always finalised, or ordinarily finalised, after the committee resolution, because our authority for completing that 106 agreement comes from that committee resolution, and there may need to be amendments made as a result of obligations that change, so we never negotiate to a final stage or final completed agreement.
Before reserve matters?
No, it will be done before the permission is... in the event that the application is approved, the 106 would then need to be in place before a planning permission can be issued.
I'm not quite sure.
What the 106 agreement secures is the village hall or open space contribution as a formula, so the precise figure of it isn't in the agreement. So it doesn't say they will pay £500,000, it says they will pay this figure, which is to be calculated as the final number of dwellings based on the SPD. So it's a formula that goes in that enables the calculation to come out.
I understand the formula, but what you're basically saying is that formula hasn't been calculated for the community as it stands at the moment.
It exists in the SPD documents that are there, so it tells you how it's going to be calculated, so it's open and transparent.
How much is that for the community?
Well, I don't have... They would have to run the figures through the system, because obviously we've not done that because we're not negotiating the 106 agreement yet. But what I mean is that the detail is out there and in the public domain, so it is open to seeing what it would be.
I don't really follow what you're saying there, because it's either there or it isn't. And when Strata Homes built their houses, there were commuted sums under a 106 agreement determined there for the village hall in Dishforth, which didn't need the money. Now, I don't know why that was. That's a long time ago now. But if nothing has been consulted on, I don't think I've heard anything from the planning department. I may be wrong on this, but about any commuted sums being discussed for the community at large, rather than highways and all schools and all the rest of it.
It is referenced in the report that there will be contributions towards village halls, open space, etc.
How much is that?
Well, as we're saying, because the difference here with some of the developments that you've seen is that if this was a full planning application, where we had all the details of all the houses, we knew what they were like, we knew what the numbers were, you'd have that figure. But this is an outline application. It's for up to a number, so it's not quite necessarily set in stone. It's not going to be any more than that, but it could be less. And because that contribution is ultimately dependent upon the detail of the exact number of houses that are built yet, that's why we can't nail down an exact sum yet. But what we are saying is it will be in accordance with the calculation which is set out in the SPD on village halls and open space contributions, which is the same as it is for any development to the local plan area.
You've put the contributions to all these other highways and etc., but haven't been able to do that.
Can I just interject and try and put it into terms that my pretty uncomplicated or complicated mind might work in? Is what you're saying similar to if I own a hotel and somebody rings up and says, I want to throw a birthday party, how much are you going to charge per head? If I was going to tell you I've got 200 guests, you could say, well, it's £20 a head times 200, therefore it's £4,000. But if there was 100 guests, it would be £2,000 because I don't know how many guests are coming. I can't give you the exact figure. Is that what we're kind of saying?
Yes.
Source of yes.
Does anybody, Councillor Nolan?
Different voice. A question about the future home standard. To Ms Harrison, you said something along the lines of they could, so this question about sustainability standard, you said they could put in, or they might put in air source heat pumps and solar. So I did my little web search, and it says that the future home standard effectively mandates heat pumps, solar PV, and significantly improved building factor. So from that, it would seem, because it said, was it 75%? Oh, 75% improvement. So that would seem from that they would have to put in, if these houses are going to match the future home standard, they will have solar PV and they will have air source heat pumps as standard. That's as I understand it. Do you not agree with that?
They'll have to definitely meet that standard, so whatever they need to do for that standard, yeah, they'll have to meet that, or any superseding standard, of course. The reason why we ask for the full details at a later date, when the scheme, all the details of the scheme are known, is if the standards have changed, we ensure that we get the most up-to-date standards, which are normally the better ones. So depending on how long it takes, I'm not sure, we could have a different standard, but for now, developments have to meet that standard.
Right, so we can assume that all these houses, at the current standard as planned, if they're built, will have solar PV, will have air source heat pumps, and significantly improved insulation. Right. So my question was, well, maybe I should ask later, I don't know, it doesn't mention battery storage. So I mean, maybe that's is that for the debate later, the Chair, or would I would like to push for battery storage as well. I mean, just as an aside, I have all those, and my charge for last month was £1.38. That was my energy charge.
I think that's probably for the debate. And
that's probably right. So I'm just going to future. Okay, second question then, about sustainability. If this is a sustainable development, and I know that's sustainable is battered around all the time, and I understand why it's being called a sustainable development, because it's within a bus ride and close driving of Ripon and Thirsk in particular. Although you'd have to get did a quick check. I did a check earlier to get to Topcliffe. Well, they're 4 or 5 times a day, not very good. My question was, if there's money available, it's only going to be a one-off payment, isn't it, as part of this Section 106? How will that fund, or what sort of bus services are going to be put in place? Is there any kind of planning at the moment? Because the nearest bus to Ripon is 11:06 in the morning. So will there be any discussion with the parish council, the residents, about what sort of buses they would like or need in order to make it a sustainable development? And as an addendum to that, if the water and sewage are not viable for the village on the size it is now, if you add the houses without any improvement, how can that be called sustainable?
Yeah, with regards to the bus service, I think it was £2,000 Highways have asked for per dwelling, so we'll be given that money, and then Highways will need to speak to the bus provider and look at what that can get for the residents, and what improvement that money can be spent on. Obviously, if the feeling is an earlier bus to Ripon, then that's something that we can definitely push for, but like someone mentioned, it's not North Yorkshire Council who run this bus service, so we'll have to engage in discussions with them, and of course Parish Council, to secure the best that we can with that money.
Thank you.
My very last question at this stage, Chairman. I think Simon Thackeray's email or letter has been read and sent to the planners and your good selves, dated the 29th of May. Is that correct?
I have received a few emails with that name, correct?
Yes. Where he says in his conclusion, the local planning authority does not require the permission of Yorkshire Water to do what is necessary and reasonable. The condition sought is justified in all respects. Both the Environment Agency and applicant have assumed capacity in the Yorkshire Water Sewer network where no available capacity exists. Both the EA, Environment Agency opinion, and Andrew Mosley Associates, who are the applicants' flooding and foul drainage company, that the flood risk assessment and drainage strategy were written and submitted prior to the Yorkshire Water statement of the 17th of February 2026 that confirmed the lack of available sewage system capacity. Do you not feel that our meeting today should be deferred to allow extra time for the local planning authority, applicant and consultees, including Yorkshire Water, to review, revise and resubmit up-to-date evidence?
I think with the greatest of respect, I think this question's been re-put a few times already earlier on this afternoon.
Well, tell me what the answer to that.
Effectively, you have a representation that says that there isn't capacity. Yorkshire Water have objected, saying there is no capacity. Obviously, officers have given you advice on this. I have given some advice on this in regards to the statutory undertaker's role and their obligation to create that capacity, and that there is case law that asserts that the way that effectively a local planning authority can properly deal with this is by imposing a condition on any such planning permission to ensure that those details are resolved essentially, and that's where the granting condition comes in. So I think, in a roundabout way, effectively, what this objector asks for is that there should be conditions attached because there's no capacity, ultimately, and obviously that is what officers are recommending to you in terms of this application, in terms of dealing with the foul and water sewerage.
So what you're basically saying, from a legal point of view, is if this is granted, Yorkshire Water have a responsibility, but they don't have the money to do it at the moment. Because it's not in the capital programme.
They have a duty, and that's...
They may have a duty, but if they can't carry that duty out...
The authorities' remit in this, as set down in case law, is that where there is a capacity issue, and only Yorkshire Water can give evidence of that capacity issue, which we have because they have objected to the scheme and have said in that objection we do not have capacity. In that situation, the correct way for the local planning authority to deal with that is to attach a condition to any subsequent planning permission to ensure that it is resolved.
Or not accept the application until that investment is made.
I think I've answered the question in that sense. I think if members were minded to be looking at... Obviously, I'm just conscious we're not in debate, and I think if members went down there, I think I'd probably ask permission to intervene again and give members further advice on that point. I think it's maybe not an area to deal with in
I know what your advice would be, I think. I'm just asking the question whether we can defer this to get further information about a very important aspect, because I've seen it on the ground.
I think
sewage on the streets.
In answer to your question, you have the objection, you have the advice in terms of how that can be dealt with, it should be conditioned. I don't see that, I suppose in my view or my advice to the members is what are you deferring for, what information are you going to get beyond Yorkshire Water objecting, which they have done.
Anyway, I've said my piece.
Essentially, we already know that they have an objection. What I'm personally trying to get my head around is that grounds for a refusal, given that the appropriate way we are told to deal with it is by way of condition, and that Yorkshire Water have a statutory obligation to put the infrastructure in, and the condition in itself would prevent properties from being built out and occupied unless Yorkshire Water actually came along and put the network in.
Chair, shall we hear from supporters and objectors while we dwell on that?
Yeah.
What I'm going to suggest is we take a 5-minute break, because there's been a lot of questions, so if we could just reconvene at past, that would be great. Turn off their mobile phones or put them on silent and be seated. That would be great. So, Right, okay, so we're going to move now on to the speakers. I understand we have 2 speakers for this item. So if I could remind you that in fact, we have 3 speakers now, because I understand the Parish Council are going to address us as well. So if I could remind you, you all have 5 minutes from when you start speaking. We are very strict on the time, just for the purposes of fairness, I'm afraid. So we have Catherine Pittaway from the Dishworth Residents Group, who is an objector who will address us. And we're going to have Martin Flanagan from Dishworth Parish Council, and Emma Gummersall, who is the agent for the applicants. So if I could ask Catherine to come forward, please. If you'd like to take the seat there, if you press the kind of face button with the voice on so it becomes red, and then if you speak into the microphone, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As you heard, my name is Catherine. I moved to Dishworth from Leeds with my family 5 years ago. While we appreciate the community, residing here presents significant challenges that were not immediately apparent. Access to essential services is limited. 5 years on, my husband and I still cannot secure NHS dental placement locally, resulting in a 62-mile round trip to Leeds for routine dental care. 2 years ago, I tried to move my 2 children to Dishworth School. I was unable to do so as both year groups were full. I tried the next nearest school at Topcliffe. They were also at capacity. Therefore, my children now attend school 12 miles away. This results in a daily 48 miles in school runs alone, which, combined with my 35-mile work commute, makes car dependency a necessity rather than a choice. Despite my property being closest to the proposed site entrance, we did not receive the consultation leaflet from Cadix. This is a breach of the NPPF. As this committee evaluates this application, I will demonstrate that the recommendation for approval contains unresolved conflicts with the Statutory Development Plan and national policy. Firstly, Local Planning Policy GS3 supports development within the local plan limits. However, this site lies outside those limits. Development beyond limits is only permissible if it is proportionate and satisfies specific criteria A to D. On proportionality, this proposed 25% growth is on top of 60% growth in the last 7 years, meaning total village growth would be 125%. This is not proportionate for a small rural village whose infrastructure is already strained, and integration, of course, takes time. The proposal also fails criteria C due to the major moderate visual harm it would inflict on the landscape, which is a significant part of the village's character, and thus I submit also fails criteria D. Paragraph 1019 of the report concedes conflicts with policy GS3 and NE4, noting that the development fails to protect, enhance or restore the landscape character, but offers no justification for overriding these critical failures. Presumption in favour of sustainable development requires satisfying all 4 criteria. This application clearly fails on that test. Secondly, policy NE8. This is Grade 2 best and most versatile agricultural land. It can only be developed exceptionally if there is an overriding need and lower grade land is unavailable or benefits justify the loss. The applicant has not presented any assessment of alternative sites, making it impossible for you to be able to determine if this exceptional allowance is met. And evidence is that alternative, more sustainable sites are available. recent applications at Kirby Hill, Langthorpe and Boroughbridge would deliver 803 dwellings that have access to existing services within walking distance. These sites are very different from our single access point village of Dishforth. Additionally, brownfield land at Dishforth Airfield is now offered on the call for sites. This provides far more sustainable opportunity for large-scale housing where infrastructure can be integrated by design. The existence of these alternative sites that are within 5 miles of Dishforth invalidates the claim that high-quality agricultural land must be sacrificed. The report's reasoning that there is a lack of suitable alternative land is therefore inaccurate and critically flawed. This application fails to meet the stringent legal requirements of Policy NE8. I urge the committee to take pause. At the very least, defer this decision until a comprehensive assessment of alternative sites and policy conflicts is conducted. Thirdly, we have serious concerns regarding Yorkshire Water's ability to meet the development's needs, as current capacity for the village is 643 people. The confirmation of that has already been provided by email to the committee. Fourthly, the proposal of the retail facility and bus service should form no part of your considerations. There is no condition forcing the retail facility into existence, nor is there any evidence of its costings or business viability. Similarly, the cost analysis for increased bus service has not been provided.
If you could wind up in a few seconds, you're nearly at 5 minutes, thank you.
Or evidence of the offered contribution would be sufficient, nor is there evidence that the service provider has capacity for the proposed bus service. Has the applicant even spoken with the bus provider? Until these are proven, no weight should be attached to them as evidence of sustainability.
I'm going to have to ask you to end there, thank you very much. Flanagan would like to come and speak to us now. Thank you. Once again, 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Chair, members of the committee, I recognise you're in a difficult position. There's pressure from housing targets, pressure from the tilted balance, but that pressure doesn't remove your duty to make a lawful planning decision. It doesn't remove the development plan, and it doesn't remove the need for reliable evidence. The question today is not whether housing is needed, it is. The question is whether this particular application on this particular site, with this particular evidence, complies with planning policy. The Harrogate District Local Plan remains the adopted plan for this area. The NPPF is clear that planning decisions must be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. This is an unallocated site outside Dishforth's development limits, and the applicant relies heavily on the housing supply and tilted balance. But the tilted balance is not a blank cheque. It does not turn an unsuitable site into a sustainable one, and the sustainability case is weak. Dishforth has limited services, most employment, all healthcare, secondary education, retail and day-to-day services are outside of the village. Travel packs and encouragement do not change the reality that future residents will depend heavily on private cars, and a financial contribution of £2,000 per house is not a bus service. And that conflicts with the NPPF Sustainable Transport Objectives and the Local Plan Policy TI1. But the main concern is wastewater and water quality. Local Plan Policy NE2 requires the developer to demonstrate appropriate sewerage infrastructure and sufficient sewage treatment capacity, so there is no deterioration in water quality. And that is a clear policy test. It is not enough to say the site may connect to the public sewer. It is not enough to say that Yorkshire Water can deal with matters later. The planning question is whether the applicant has demonstrated before permission is granted that the receiving sewerage system and treatment works have the capacity to accept this development without harm to water quality. And that has not been demonstrated. In February 2026, Yorkshire Water confirmed that the applicant's flood risk assessment, Drainage Strategy Revision 4, was acceptable. But in that report, it said that there was no capacity constraints within the local sewerage system. And that directly conflicts with Yorkshire Water's own objection, which is based on insufficient sewerage capacity. So members are being asked to determine an application on contradictory evidence. Yorkshire Water cannot accept a report saying there is no sewer capacity problem, while also objecting that there is a sewer capacity problem. You can't be a little bit pregnant. There's a credibility problem as well. In May 24, Yorkshire Water publicly claimed it was investing at Dishforth wastewater treatment to expand capacity and cope with increased flows from recently completed housing development. But when asked directly under an environmental information regulation request, it admitted the opposite. The scheme did not expand capacity, and the current population capacity is 643. And that matters because Dishforth has around 1,000 residents already. This is not a technical footnote. It goes to the reliability of consultation evidence. And if previous developments were supposedly allowed for by an upgrade that Yorkshire Water now admits did not happen, then the committee must not simply wave through the next development on the same assumption. At best, the evidence is confused, and at worst, materially misleading. Either way, it is not a sound basis for approval. I'm not asking members to resolve every single technical wastewater issue. I'm asking members not to make a planning decision on unsound facts. The legal duty here is to make a lawful planning decision based on the development plan, material considerations and reliable evidence. Where the evidence on wastewater capacity is contradictory and where the statutory consultee's public statement has been directly contradicted by its own EIR response, the safe course is not approval. The application conflicts with multiple local plan policies, including TI1 and NE2, and with the NPPF's requirements for sustainable development, sustainable transport, infrastructure provision and protection of the natural environment. I therefore ask the committee to refuse the application. If members are minded not to refuse, then it should be deferred until Yorkshire Water provides clear written evidence.
If you could just bring it to a close in a few seconds.
Yeah, no worries. On foul sewer capacity, treatment capacity, environmental impact and any upgrades required before occupation. Thank you.
So next we're going to hear from Emma Gummersall, who is the agent for the applicant. 5 minutes from when he starts.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant, who is also with me here today. We welcome the officer's thorough assessment of the application as detailed within the report before you and their clear recommendation for approval. I won't labour the point regarding the Council's housing line supply position. It's a matter that you're obviously acutely aware of. It is important to acknowledge, however, that because of this situation, the application before you must be determined in accordance with paragraph 11D of the NPPF and the application of the tilted balance. This being granting planning permission unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Every development carries impact. However, informed by case law and with the input from colleagues, the planning officer has expertly undertaken the necessary balancing exercise, attributing professionally judged weight to both the impacts of the development and the benefits. As you've heard, these benefits include providing 98 houses, 40% of which would be affordable in a 2.2-year housing supply position to which significant weight is afforded. Indeed, the courts have actually attributed substantial weight to this in the planning balance. Significant biodiversity enhancement well beyond 10% at nearly 70%. New public open space with 45% of the site afforded to open space, and play provisions set centrally within the village. There's also opportunity for a new village shop, which will be marketed as per the Section 106 obligations. It will bring pedestrian connectivity improvement, including drop curb, crossing points and widening of the footpath to the south of Topcliffe Road. It will also contribute towards bus service improvements, as we've heard, and contribute towards supporting the growth of Dishforth primary school and contributions towards supporting the growth of top-cliff surgery. The case officer concludes that these benefits are not significantly or demonstrably outweighed by what is classified as moderate, localised landscape harm, less than substantial heritage harm, or limited negative weight attributed to the loss of agricultural land. In this context, it is worth noting that less than 1%, the site compromises less than 1% of the landowner's overall holdings. This balancing exercise undertaken by your officer is a conclusion that we concur with. The scheme therefore represents sustainable development and should be granted permission in accordance with national policy. Before I finish, I'd just like to pick up the point regarding drainage. We acknowledge that Yorkshire Water have identified there is not capacity within the foul network. The developer has a statutory right to connect to the public sewer system under the Water Industry Act. A statutory water undertaker cannot refuse this. The Supreme Court has made it clear that if there is a capacity issue in the public sewerage system, this can be dealt with by way of a planning condition imposed on the consent. At a recent appeal in the former Selby district, the inspector agreed with this approach and drainage matters were conditioned accordingly. I'd like to thank you for your time today.
Okay, right then. Right, so moving on to the debate. I'm going to go with Councillor Andy Brown first of all.
What a horrible situation. There's a real difference here between what is morally right and what is wise. If we just turn this down on the grounds that we don't like it, we lose all control because it will simply be approved on appeal. I come from a village which has had more developments than there were houses in it when I moved into the village, and I understand exactly what you're complaining about, what you're concerned about, what impact it has on the community, etc. The cumulative impact of this is too much, but we've been advised that we haven't got a planning basis for using the cumulative impact as a reason for refusal. And that puts us in a really difficult position. We aren't just allowed to consider village needs. We are forced to consider a set of rules, and those rules are heavily biased towards approval of houses. And it's not just a product of one government doing that, it's a product of 2-3 governments doing that. We have a local plan. But we have massive housing targets which have smashed apart that local plan's effectiveness. And to be fair to the developer, there are 98 houses here which, there seem to be all the things you would look for in any development. 40% are affordable, 70% of those are social, there's an open space contribution that's significant, there's contributions towards schools and healthcare, even if the healthcare is some distance away, and I hear the real sensible concerns about dental care. There's a contribution to a bus service of 196,000, though you're absolutely right, bus service 4 times a day doesn't make something a genuinely sustainable location where people don't use cars. It contributes a shop to the village, which is a real asset. And I think I've heard that the 106 condition could insist on marketing that. There's increased security for the future of the village pub and school, though we heard that school's over capacity, but there's some significant funding going into improving it. There's gains, not losses for wildlife. So we're in a really difficult position. If we look at what the local plan originally said and what's sensible, we'd have grounds to say no. If we look at the cumulative impact, we'd have grounds to say no. If we look at if we look at the heritage harm and the archaeology, we'd have some grounds to say no. The only ground I can see that is really a killer and we absolutely have to insist on, is this Yorkshire Water situation. They've told us bluntly they can't cope with the sewage on the current capacity. The villagers have told us that it's for 643 people and there's already 1,000. We cannot reasonably approve a development that hasn't got a condition in that says Yorkshire Water has to update the capacity before anything's occupied. But I've been given a public assurance by the officers that's very clear that the developer cannot occupy the first building until that sewage capacity is there off-site as well as taking it off-site. So that condition 18, we've been told, is a Grampian condition that secures what we want. So I'm left in an impossible position where I can't see any legal grounds to do anything to approve something which I completely agree with the villagers is going to add to the overwhelming of their village. I'm forced in a position where I need to vote for it and don't want to.
Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Broderick.
Thank you, Chair. I agree totally with what Councillor Andy Brown has just said. I understand what the villagers are going through. Certainly when the speaker talked about the schools, for example, it's already at capacity. Building 98 more houses, even a small amount of cumulative sums going into that school will not necessarily increase the capacity sufficiently enough for the amount of potential amount of children that are going to that school. And I know for a fact, I'm on the Home to Schools Transport Appeal Committee, that a lot of people have to pay for it themselves to transport their children to school when there's a perfectly good school in the village, but it's full to capacity. So, and how are we going to encourage families to move to villages? We end up with, unfortunately, an ageing population in villages where families won't go, which in fact also has an impact when there are a few bus services there. So I'm like-minded that I don't want to support this application. I feel there are a lot of flaws in it, but as it states in here, there are no policies within the framework that would provide a strong enough reason for refusal. The system is flawed. We have to give good reasons why we refuse it, and unfortunately we can't, other than this issue over condition 18. It does state in there that according to the development in phases cannot continue until Yorkshire Water has carried out whatever it's going to put into its plans. We don't know what they are and we don't know what the timescale is yet. I'm a bit concerned about the word phase. I would rather that was taken out, and it actually bluntly says that the development cannot go ahead, it cannot be occupied until Yorkshire Water has put in the available capacity. To actually put a phase in means that you can do it bit by bit. And I feel it should be that, as I've just said, no house can be occupied until Yorkshire Water has put that capacity in. And although Yorkshire Water has a statutory obligation, we all know that Ofwat is a toothless tiger. And we've seen it, as Councillor Nick Brown has said, we've seen it in other villages where the streets are full of sewage, and in winter time there's lots of flooding. And I think it's absolutely appalling in 21st century Britain that we're living in, where there are streets full of sewage. That's 19th century Victorian age, not 21st century. So Unfortunately, as I said, our hands are tied. We don't want to agree to this, but we have to. Thank you.
Councillor Nord.
Unfortunately, I'm going to agree with Councillor Brown and Councillor Brodigan, very much so. I just want to make some further points, especially the one about Ofwat, which is kind of like Quango of sanctuary for failed water executives. We're asked to support villages, aren't we? Several primary schools have closed in just the 4 years I've been a North Yorkshire councillor, but this one's full. So I wonder what guarantees are going to be given to residents. I've done some back of the fag packet calculations. It's £19,000 per pupil. Even if there's one extra pupil per house, that's only £2 million as a one-off. Will North Yorkshire build more capacity in Dishworth School? There's no guarantee to the villages. So they'll end up with these 48-mile round trips, perhaps at least minimum per day. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about this future home standard. I hope that it means all these houses have solar and air source heat pumps. That means there'll be no gas infrastructure. So no residents having to put up with their roads being dug up every other week. I would hope that in future, I know it's only in principle, that you will be in discussion with the developers, and I hope you'll be asking for battery storage, water butts, to cope with the droughts we get more often, and porous driveways to cope with the flooding that we also get more often. I'm also concerned about the lighting. I hope that it will be dark skies friendly lighting rather than just bat friendly lighting. And furthermore, especially with my division, I'm concerned about the informal crossings. I have informal crossings in my division, but the residents want formal crossings, so they are safer. So I would hope that they can be more formalised, but then the parish council might not want more formal, so Belisha beacons, all the rest of it. I'd leave that up for them to lobby for. At the end of it, it comes down to if there's a gramping condition that the sewage capacity is up to standard, not just for the residents at the moment, but the residents are planned, then that's about all we can assist. And as I understand it, that means the capacity will be brought up to standard before anybody inhabits one of these houses. And if that's all we can do today, then that's the best we can do, I think. Our hands are tied by governments and these new housing limits that we've been given. So that's all I want to say.
Mr. Chairman, I've listened to everything that's been said this afternoon, and I'm not of the opinion that our hands are as tied as has been mentioned to me. The planning officer has said that not all applications must be accepted, which I listened to as well. And if that wasn't the case, then what's the purpose of having a planning committee if every time we have to abide by law, in this particular instance, although that is in my mind a little bit dubious because of all the reasons that have been made by the residents, by the officers here, that this is not the most satisfactory application. A standard's got to be made. I know it's costly. If it goes to appeal, it may not be. But as my colleague Andy Brown has said, morally this is totally wrong in my view. But as I say, if this planning committee structure has to have any meat whatsoever, we must be in a position to refuse an application if by and large most of the things that have been put forward are not going to occur. We don't know what the bus situation is going to be. We don't know what the time frame is for Yorkshire Water to put in adequate things to stop sewage on the streets. And in my experience, right across my own division, the sewage on the streets is a very real threat to health and happiness of the residents in each of the areas, whether it's Bishop Monkton, Kirby Hill, Langthorpe. Dishforth itself has had problems. Now, that is all because of a failing sewage system, some of which the problem goes back to Victorian times. And frankly, to accept everything the government said just because they want to hit targets that they're blatantly not going to hit, in my view, I am of a view that I would like to propose we refuse this application because very valid planning reasons, not least the disposal of foul sewage, on top of what we've got at the moment, 643, we're now up to 1,000 houses, and adding more to that would mean there'll be all sorts of reasons why the development can continue. They'll be pleased to change the conditions and do all the rest of the thing that the applicants do. And on the basis of that, on everything to do with this application, we haven't mentioned odour for residents, which is mentioned here. They can't guarantee that there'll be no odour for the residents surrounding the houses. And I know jolly well from my own village that the sewage works there can occasionally be an awful stink, which affects the well-being of all the residents. So why is this not going to be the case in this particular application? So I'm going to propose that we refuse this application and on firm planning grounds, that the water sewage, it will be years away from the money being spent on this, and the fact that in the villages I represent that have problems with Yorkshire Water, it doesn't seem to matter what we say. It's at their own time that the capital investment is put forward to change what is an antiquated system of combined sewers, etc., etc. All the other reasons that have been stated, frankly, I think this is an unsustainable village when it comes to more houses in it, by a long way. Whether it's, as I say, buses or any of the other facets we've discussed today. And someone's got to make a stand, and I would propose that we refuse this application because I think it's very unfair. We've got sound reasons. It's outside of the local plan, which has been said. And these opportunistic applications should be stopped at some stage. Else, where do we stand in totality? We go against the government's diktat. Some people voted for this government to produce 1.5 million. It's not going to happen, but it's very detrimental to many, many communities across this great county of ours. So I would like to propose that we refuse this application.
Councillor Heseltine.
Thank you, Chairman. There is the Secretary of State for Housing in Westminster, who sits round the Cabinet and advises the Prime Minister, who between them set these housing targets for the nation. And as Nick Brown has said, there's not a cat in hell's chance of planning committees agreeing to those numbers over the lifetime of the Parliament. So what do? There's a planning and infrastructure bill going through Parliament at present, which will take 90% of the responsibilities of local planning committees away from us. And so virtually all decisions will either be taken by officers. I have nothing against that as long as you get them right. But we're always in a position as members, if you do occasionally get them wrong, we can correct them. That's what we're here for. Just think what this nation is going to be without virtually any control on planning development. It would appear to me that the good people of Dishworth and every other community across the nation, with the passing of that planning bill and what's already in front of us, local democracy in Dishworth from today, if we don't take a stand against the bullies at Westminster, that local democracy is dead. You have nothing. We sat around here, we have a responsibility to take into account public feeling. We're not in a position to do that, we say. But one thing I have learnt in my 81 years on this earth is you stand up to bullies. If you don't stand up to bullies, then all you do is a grinding into the ground. And that's what's happening to local democracy, length and breadth of this nation. We are being ground into the ground. Chairman, the fight back has to start somewhere, and I can't think of a better place than the beautiful village in the county of North Yorkshire, that we stand up for democracy, we stand up for principle, and I'll second refusal of this and see where it gets us. It could well cost, if it's passed, and I doubt my colleagues will support a refusal. Think of the future, think of the future. Think of these villages across North Yorkshire that within another 3 years we'll have hundreds of planning applications forward that'll be passed, and the beauty of North Yorkshire will be destroyed forever, destroyed on the altar of the bully boys at Westminster.
Yeah, I'm strongly in favour of the politics of what Robert's just said. I mean, I'm a complete opponent of building developments on greenfield lands that are usually executive homes and not particularly needed by that community. So I have absolutely no problem agreeing with you about what we should be politically campaigning against. I do have a problem with using this village as the fighting ground when it will actually be against the interests of this village. If we turn this down, let me finish what I say. If we turn this down and it goes to appeal, the conditions will be written by the appeal judge. That will remove the condition we've managed to secure that Yorkshire Water have to supply it. We will end up with worse conditions and a fee. So I am sitting here politically agreeing with every one of you that what they're doing to your village is wrong, the cumulative impact is wrong, but I'm also sitting here knowing that if I vote in favour of rejection, you'll get worse conditions, the thing will be passed, and we will be out of control. So I mean, that's basically the dilemma I'm facing.
Bring it on. Is anybody else wanting to speak? Councillor Noel.
Did we vote against the development in Bishop Monkton about a year and a half ago? I remember you banging the table, Councillor Nick Brown, and saying there's sewage flowing down the street of this village, it shouldn't happen, and we all agree with you, and we voted in principle, we voted against that development. It went straight down to Bristol, and they won the appeal, and the houses are going to be built. And you ignored your solicitor's appeal. So, can you tell us any more about that actual development? Do I remember it right? And is that what we're facing here?
That was different because there were some attenuation tanks that could meet it was a small development. Here we're talking about a very big development, and it could be even bigger if after approving something like this today, they come on and say, well, we're going to change our minds about the other part of the site. So it's a different case then. I think here, with all the sort of things we've heard today, especially the foul sewage aspect to it, which I don't want to have on my conscience, sewage flowing down the streets, as has happened in Dishworth. Because that affects children, it affects people in the community, and someone's got to stand up against it, and I agree with my colleague here that we should stand up for it. I also think, as the planning officer has said, it doesn't mean to say if this is appealed, it goes down to Bristol and the inspector approves this, because there's a lot of things here in planning law that are wrong. And, whether it's sustainable, whether this is a sustainable village, I would argue it isn't. I would argue that the bus provision is not realistic. It could be stopped by this, I'm not going to be very rude about him, in the combined authority, who's done certain other things regarding potholes and everything else, which is absolutely outrageous. But, that's out of our hands. The people voted in a democratic way, and now democracy means that we have a choice here to refuse something that is morally and physically wrong for this particular village. We should be going for other new towns, for example. Harrogate, I put forward years ago in Harrogate, was put on the naughty step for saying it, that Flaxby was the best place to put a new town. And that was turned down, much to my annoyance and people getting at me for even mentioning that particular site. So here I think there are arguments that we should refuse this, as I've said, and I thank my colleague for seconding it. And I think those that are simply going to say, well, the government says this, so we've all got to acquiesce, is not my way of doing things. We live in a democracy, and if we say something, okay, the government may say the things, but they won't get the votes of some of the people in this particular area if that happens. So be it. It is slightly political, not in my case, I'm not that political. I think that the residents should have much more choice in what happens. And if that doesn't happen, be as it may. But I stick by my principles, and I still recommend that we refuse this application.
Councillor Brodigan.
Thank you, Chair. I mentioned earlier on about condition 18, about the foul drainage. Is it possible to withdraw the word phase out of it, so that it would actually read that no development shall commence until a detailed foul drainage scheme, including maintenance arrangements and a timetable for provision of the development, has been submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and the development shall thereafter be only occupied in accordance with the approved details. Is that possible to take out the word phase? So no building then would actually be occupied unless...
Developed,
sorry. Won't be started and won't be... The development won't start, and therefore none will be occupied unless Yorkshire Water has put the right capacity in, sufficient capacity.
Point of order, Chair. I think the way we should proceed is to vote on the proposal to reject. Should that fall, then it would be down to Barbara and myself to put forward a proposal on the lines that Barbara said, and we would vote on that.
Can I speak first, and then I think Kelly, if we're going to do that, Kelly would like to speak. Whilst I might be 50 years old, I would have to guess that I'm not the oldest person on this committee. and possibly, whilst I'm the chair of the committee, it may be that people here have more experience than I have of dealing with planning applications and making decisions. And it pains me to say this, but from my position of chair, it's not for me to make a stand and make a moral decision. The obligation that falls on me is to make a decision in accordance with current planning law and legislation and the regulations that we're governed by. Because if I fail to do that, then it leaves the applicant open to make an appeal, and potentially we lose on appeal at that stage. And at that stage also we lose control over the conditions that we condition on this development. For the record, I don't like the development. I cannot see any particular evidence that convinces me that Dishworth needs another 98 homes and potentially another 400 residents. The problem that I have is my understanding of the current legislation is that a requirement for North Yorkshire to build homes shouldn't be considered on the basis of locality within North Yorkshire, whether Dishworth needs them or not, or whether Harrogate needs them or not. It's just, do we meet our targets? And I find that really difficult, because I find that ridiculous, to be perfectly honest, because my understanding is if we're told we have to build that many homes, we have to do it. If they're not in the local development plan, which was passed lawfully a number of years ago, which now has been torn up in some degree, we just have to build them wherever an application is submitted, provided that other...
That's not what the law says. It says that you can step outside the limit if it is proportional.
Okay, I'm going to keep talking because you've had your opportunity to speak. I don't like anything particularly about this application. I really think that Dishworth is not the correct place to build these houses. However, I can't see that I can vote against the application based on that and that alone. So one of the questions that I'm then asking myself is, does the loss of Grade 2 agricultural land tilt the balance against the obligations that Westminster's placed on us to build more housing than is required under the current local development plan? I think it probably doesn't, given that what we're losing is some acreage, but we're not losing hundreds of acres of land, and we are providing 98 houses, albeit that I don't think that we're building the houses in the right place. There are some other concerns that I have that have been raised in relation to the Section 106 agreement, in so much as that providing £2,000 per property to improve the bus service doesn't guarantee an improved bus service. It may be the case, as is in other parts of the county, that money's been set aside to improve bus services and the money doesn't get spent. It's just sat there because agreement can't be reached with the local bus company to increase the services, to increase the capacity. And as Councillor Brown, I think, alluded to, that's actually something that's almost beyond our control anyway now, because bus services and determination of where licences are and for bus services rest with the Mayor's office. So it's no longer for the County Council to dictate to the bus companies what services they provide. I'm all in favour of building service villages where increased population will result in services that exist being supported and sustained so that people don't lose their services. But that's where services already exist. All we're talking about here is almost a wing and a prayer that the bus company will put another bus service on every day and that someone will take up occupancy of a shop. So those are the things that I have to consider. In terms of the drainage issue, I know we've had, this committee's considered applications in respect of other villages where there's been drainage issues. But my understanding from what we've been told is that no houses can be built or occupied unless the drainage situation, foul drainage, is resolved. And so we won't have a situation where foul water and mess ends up on people's streets because we've conditioned that. So reluctantly, I'm probably going to have to vote in favour of the application, even though I don't favour it, if that makes sense. Did you want to come in at this point, Kelly?
Right, members, so we have a proposal and a seconder in terms of refusal. Now, what I have noted, and correct me if I've got this wrong, what I have noted is three potential reasons. One, the sewerage. Two, unsustainable village location, or is it unsustainable village location outside of the local plan area, or are they two separate points? Are they 3 points?
Several points, actually. Those are separate points, yes.
Yes, right, so there is a 3 point. Right, what I need to draw members' attention to before you can take a vote on this is those particular grounds. So in relation to your sewerage and your being outside the local plan development areas.
That's one.
Yeah.
Two.
Now,
the use of good quality agricultural land.
Right, that wasn't cited, or made a note of that being cited, so I'm trying to clarify.
It's been mentioned.
Yeah.
That's another good reason to refuse it, if you're looking for planning grounds.
What I need to do is give members advice on those planning reasons that are being put forward. So in relation to the sewerage reason for refusal, as has already been sort of talked about this afternoon, we've already been through, whereas something is capable of being mitigated by condition, that is the reasonable action to take. It is not reasonable to refuse something that could be condition, and I need to draw members' attention to a cost warning at this point, because we have cost awarded on this very point in other area planning committee areas.
Can I be helpful, Chair? Could I suggest that there are two others that, if they wish to add, they could. One is impact on listed buildings. The other is alternative sites availability has not been thoroughly checked. And the one that Nick raised that I think you didn't necessarily capture was unsustainable location in practice. Doesn't mean I'm going to change my vote.
As was so pointedly made by Ms. Pittaway about her journeys to basic services.
If I could just finish the cost warning. Obviously, I need to draw members' attention to those risks and the likelihood of this decision being
It might be totally unnecessary, depending on the vote.
Yes, but I just need to draw, it needs to be in members' minds that where something is capable of being conditioned, it should be rather than being refused. And in relation to being outside of the development limits, I need to draw members' attention to paragraph 11D, policies deemed out of date where you don't have a land supply. That would affect your local plan development areas. And obviously members need to be aware of the risks of an award of costs against the authority should reasons that could be either overcome by condition or are not sustainable planning reasons for refusal on appeal. If it is overturned, there will be significant cost implications for the authority if the cost award is made against the authority. So I just need the proposer and seconder to consider which grounds they wish to put forward to the vote.
All of those grounds are relevant that you've written down to my proposal. Pretty good grounds for refusal, in my view.
So you're wanting to run with the sewerage, unsustainable village location, outside development plan limits,
absolutely,
loss of
not in the local plan. What's the point of having, as Councillor Brown said, spend 22 million if it's going to be totally opportunistically tested?
I think the issue that we have at this moment in time is that we need to have fully articulated reasons for refusal referring back to the policy basis, because those reasons, that formation of the reasons then forms...
I think you've nearly captured them, Chair. The only ones you're missing are, we just added loss of agricultural land and inadequate exploration of alternative sites. I'm not saying I'm changing my vote, but that's what you'd need if you were rejecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I did, yeah, sorry.
I think we need to tie that up. So what we need to say as well is that it's significantly demonstrably outweighs.
Yeah, I think my advice to members would be that if you're going to vote on that, do it as a minded to and delegate the decision to the officers, perhaps in consultation, to agree that final wording, because we do need to sort of finesse the reasons up into the sort of the formal reasons that would appear on the decision record. So we'll just be asking for that to be minded to and then delegated down, so it could just be, we've made a note of the reasons, but they just need to be, so you take the vote now.
If the vote is taken now, we'll know where we're going, won't we?
Yes, but I need it to be a minded to, because we need to take it from those bullet points that I said.
All those bullet points can be used.
Into the formal reason, so we do it as a minded to and delegate permission to the officers to...
All those bullet points can be used if it went to appeal.
The word she's looking for you to say, Nick, is that if you say you accept minded to, then she can subtly reword your put
absolutely, yeah.
Councillor Heseltine. So Councillor Brown is proposing a refusal on the grounds that we've just discussed, and you're seconding the refusal on those same grounds. Okay.
Minded to.
And you're minded to refuse.
Sorry, so it's minded to refuse, delegated to officers, and it was on those 6 grounds that we've just been through.
Okay, all those in favour? Any against? Okay. Right, so that's not proceeding then. Okay. So,
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So I propose that we grant permission with looking for the right word, providing that condition 18 found drainage is more robust in its wording, that we remove the word phase. So we're talking about the total development.
Yep, so this motion would be to approve, subject to the Section 1 and 6 agreement, with the amendment to Condition 18 to remove the reference into phasing.
Yes.
So you're proposing that, is anyone seconding that?
With extreme reluctance, I'm seconding it.
Okay. So, all those in favour? Any against? Okay. So the record will say it's passed, regardless of people's personal thoughts on the application. Right, okay. So we have no other items of business today. Does anyone have anything in any other business that they'd like to raise? We haven't got that on there, have we? Should be on there. No? Okay. So the date of the next meeting is scheduled to take place on Tuesday the 7th of July at 1 p.m. And the venue will either be Bellevue Square in Skipton or Ripon Town Hall next month. Okay, thank you very much for attending. Are we taking a training session?
Thank you, Chair.
So that will be next time.